Hello, listeners. We are back with the sixth episode of AI Now. Hope you guys will love it. Surely I will. With us today is Mr. Jaskot, an immigration attorney based in the USA, owner of Jaskot Law, startup founder, and techno enthusiast who has also developed a chatbot titled Bot. Now, right off the bat, I would like to go forth with the first question. It goes like this: the increasing use of automated decision making artificial intelligence tools in immigration may threaten basic human rights. These words were recently put up by the Censor Immigration Law blog. Being a professional in the same field, how far do you concur with the said statement?
100%. It may. I mean, when you say may, right, there's not that much there. So it's possible. Yes. I'll give you a very good example of a way that I think that human rights were threatened by my own technology. So let's put me on the barbecue first. I made a bot to help asylum seekers that were coming from Central America through Mexico. And when I went to test that bot in Mexico, what I realized is that my American centric mind had sort of assumed that everyone in the world has a very powerful cell phone, be it an iPhone, a Samsung, a Google Pixel. But when I arrived, almost no one actually had any of those models. And the basic technology that I had chosen to deliver my app on, Facebook Messenger, was not available as a supported app on their phones. They had Facebook Messenger Lite or WhatsApp. And so by my choice, my American-centric choice of putting forward technology only available to people that can afford a phone of that quality, I immediately made, basic legal advice less available for people based on their income.
All right. So, how far do you think the usage of automated decision making systems by the Canadian government to categorize visa applicants into simple and complex cases is justified? Also, especially bearing in mind the fact that if an individual is to apply for a visa and is to later find out that he or she was rejected by software or a system, the person is going to feel very upset.
Yeah, I've heard a variation of this very frequently brought up in the context of bail decisions being made by AI instead of judges. That's a super popular one here in the US. And my response to it, I think, is complex, but it starts with this. Now, I'm not that I've been in probably 5 to 10,000 bail hearings in front of judges when I was a public defender, and I'm here to tell you that they're not that great either. There's judges that are way worse than software. They're far less predictable. They're far more likely to make biased decisions based on race and other things. Now, can AI just demonstrate all those same bad characteristics? Absolutely. But guess what? We can change AI algorithms. You and I can look at our algorithm, we can make a change each day, and we can measure its performance against our goals. Judges don't change. They just change the way that they describe their decisions to avoid being yelled at for doing racist things. So I think, to me, the promise of software is it has a much higher level ceiling than human adjudicators and far less variability. As far as people's like, I don't think that people have a right to say, no, I'm only satisfied if a human rejects my application. I don't, I don't accept software rejecting my application. That makes no sense to me.
Then it's all a sociological perspective in that case. And like I have personally heard of this one case, this one judge, an Irishman who in whose court the advocates actually tried to get their cases up on the dockets in order to get the time while he had not had lunch, because after he had had lunch he would get too lazy to make decisions and he would just like adjudicate like blindly on them. So I guess I've heard of some things like that, and I believe that stuff like that happens in India a lot.
Oh my
Anyway,
gosh, yeah, I love that example because it's not even the variation isn't even human to human. It's human based on nutrition. Hilarious.
yeah. So, how far do you think the decision making capability of such systems in terms of immigration should be relied upon?
Well, so I mean, the way that I have typically approached the problem of expert systems, I mean, when I started, I was actually obsessed with expert systems. I just thought that if I could come up with a perfect expert system, sort of everything would be solved. But what I realized is that people actually have a very low tolerance for a high number of questions. And so like with your typical expert system, you're forced into this rubric where you give them a yes or no, a true or false, A, B, C, D, and then the next question and so forth. And so the accuracy of these systems is much higher than human beings. And the reason for that is that they never forget to ask a question. They never assume something that they don't actually know. And so on that side, humans actually machines already have the capacity to outstrip humans. But the next part of this is whether or not they answer yes or no, whether or not they answer A, B, C, D, can be based on the way that you write the question, the way that you write the answer, and then the way that they understand it. And so for me, the big challenge actually is in trying to leave those sort of determinative frameworks, allow for unstructured data, sentences, people to tell their story, and for us to be able to use NLP and NLU to extract the pertinent information, throw it into an expert system that the person doesn't even see, and have a more human-like conversation whilst also taking advantage of the incredible accuracy of machine-based expert systems.
Brave new world. Well, further in the same context, what rights could actually be hampered, if any?
Well, I mean, to me, this is, there's a test in the United States called the SAT, and it's very determinative of what college you get into. And it's been shown time and again that the people that do best on the SAT are the people that are most similar to the authors of that test. And so I think that that's really the big risk with AI is that we the law, at least in the United States, I'm not familiar with the Indian legal system, but I'll make a leap and assume that it's probably similar, is that the law has traditionally served the rich and poor people don't have lawyers. And so lawyers end up actually being a force of inequality in the world. They allow rich people to exploit the poor, to rig the deck, to get away with crimes that poor people don't get away with. And so
Take from the
AI,
rich, give to the rich.
excuse me?
Take from the rich and give to the rich as well.
Fair. That's true. Right. Yeah. So I mean, like at best, it's when lawyers are just doing rich versus rich fights. But they have also served, I think, as a force for bad in the world, frankly. And so what we know about AI is that it's an incredibly powerful force multiplier. And so if lawyers just continue to follow in the same frameworks that we're in now, and we use AI to make ourselves and our firms more powerful, we're just going to be an even greater force for inequality in the world.
Yeah. The concept of Techno Solutionism, brought forth by Cynthia Khu from the University of Toronto, bases upon the basic concept that technology is free of all human frailties and faults. How far do you think that is true, especially while the whole wide world is riddled with getting rid of black box problems and biasing issues?
I think that is an absurd philosophy. I hadn't heard of it, but I'm interested, of course, in the academic world. It's interesting to put forward things that are controversial, but I mean, how is it even remotely possible that AI systems that are based on human designed hardware, using human designed software, based on human design laws, would be free of human frailty or flaws? I think it's just, and the other thing is that we already have actually like a large amount of examples of AI in the real world, and it's incredibly biased. Okay, yeah, I'm gonna need one moment. I'm sorry, someone is slamming on my door.
Sure, sure, sure.
I'm sorry, I'm on a call. Yeah, not in here. Do you have a Are we back?
Yeah,
Sorry about that. Someone was banging on the door of my
yeah,
law
that's all right.
firm.
So I guess the name says it all. Techno Solutionism. Technical stuff is the solution to everything, but I guess it's not.
What do you think
Uh,
about that?
well, I believe that it might work to some extent, but I have always been of the contention that had the contention that we need people to assess our behavioral aspects of life, because if we ourselves are not disciplined enough, if we ourselves are biased to some extent towards something, and we design something, that thing is going to be biased as well. We need to
Exactly.
get our priorities sorted at first.
Yeah.
I guess so. Anyway, so the United Nations Refugee Agency, the UNHCR, has reported that post 1994 Africa has witnessed the largest waves of forced migration beginning in 2001. This undoubtedly serves to be a problem, since Africa's perception as an underdeveloped and extremely remote region has caused it to be neglected in terms of economic development or any sort of development at all. Do you think that artificial intelligence might sometime in the future be able to predict the next migration wave to that will hit of Africa to in order to inhibit any impending crisis?
Hmm. Sure. But I mean, I don't think that it's, this is one of those places where I don't know that AI, do we really even need AI to predict that? I mean, I think that as human beings, you and I could model the current systems that are in place and look at the human and natural things that could occur in each one of those countries, cause a migration, and be able to do that without AI. I mean, there have been a fair amount of data on so-called super predicting human beings that can actually make incredibly accurate assessments as to what will happen in the future, and give us a high degree of accuracy in that. I think that at times it seems like we as human beings we're like hoping that AI is going to be some sort of Superman that comes in and saves us, when we actually already have the tools to solve a lot of these things using mental models and cooperation without some sort of AI.
I guess what we always seem to forget is that we are the ones who will eventually be able to create new age AI, and not the other way around. And at least I believe that if we think that AI is going to be a Superman, that's good. At least, as long as people don't think that it's going to be a Terminator.
I mean, for me,
Well,
I think that if we want to if we want to stop mass migration from places where there is, um, you know, some agitating factors that are making people say, I've got to leave here. It's not safe for me, or I can't receive enough food for my family, or there's no education, or there's no job opportunities. That the first thing in the case of the United States is we need to stop actively hurting them. We have a lot of policies that in our country we're actually diminishing the chances of success in these countries. So first, stop hurting them, and second, see what we can do to help them. That's not sort of selfish U.S. centric behavior, and see what we can do to improve those countries, improve the chances there, and that is the only way to truly address the base concerns that are causing people to engage in mass migration.
I personally think that it's like people migrating is mostly because of economic factors. Is it true?
I mean, I'm not an expert on global migration. The migration that I see is really from the Central American Triangle, El Salvador, Honduras, and Guatemala, and Mexico, to Maryland, and to the rest of the United States. And so, I can speak to that region and the base factors there. I do see a lot of economic immigration from South America, but in Central America, it's not only economic, it's also public safety. In those countries, the criminality is so rampant that a lot of my clients had successful businesses, restaurants, shops, dairies, that they literally were having to pay bribe money daily. They were just being subjected to threats. Their family members were being kidnapped. They couldn't bear to think about going on um, in such a climate. So they were just looking for a more stable place to be. So that was part economic, but it also has to do with political and public safety.
Well, everyone longs for a fresh start in situations like this, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, the political situations are to blame for it and whatnot. Well, based upon your personal association with the world of technology amalgamated with the field of law, what have your key takeaways been in relation to artificial intelligence and the law surrounding it?
That there isn't any. I mean, no one has ever told me that I wasn't able to do anything at all. No one, and I think that, I could, if I had more funding, I could continue to operate basically without any interference from any of the bar associations. So I mean, I think that, sort of when you think about legal AI, there's sort of two ways to think about it. The one is like lawyers that are using AI for legal ends, and then the other side is, you know, what should the law be required, like vis-a-vis AI across the board, for companies like Amazon that are using AI in widespread fashion. And in both cases, at least in the United States, the legislators, they don't even understand what's going on. When you see them interviewing the top executives from American tech companies, their questions display a naivete that you would see in like a high school kid. Maybe actually worse, but high school kids understand this a little bit better. So what I've seen so far is that there's no regulation. It's not being thought about in a good way, and that people really are scared of it. So a lot of times they're sort of like, I hope it goes away. And so I would love to see thoughtful conversations about AI and how we should regulate it, both lawyers using it and people using it. But I don't see any of that. Is there any of that happening in India?
No, not really. Well, then I guess we are all just afraid of anything that we don't understand at all. But do you think that more widespread educational policies and endeavors for educating people about artificial intelligence and other technical aspects of it, would that actually be of help in a globalized world of today?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's so helpful, right? I mean, there's like,
Yeah.
I mean, what I really want to be as a platform is is something that helps lawyers build tools that they understand so that they can connect with their customers and expand the reach of their ability to help them and drop the price. That's really what I think that AI is so good at. It's so cheap. And so, my base goal really is to help lawyers understand AI so that they can build the tools to really help way, way, way more people. The law does have the power to be a force for good in the world. And I think that AI is going to be a big part of that story. So I mean, my particular niche, my vertical is helping lawyers understand AI and how to use that. But I think that people should be using that all around the world, because especially if we don't teach people this, what's going to end up happening is that the people that do understand it, large corporations, are going to use it to, again, similar to the law, to just expand their power. And people are going to feel like they're being driven by robot overlords. I mean, you're already beginning to see that in some professions, but it doesn't have to be that way. It could also be a incredible power to liberate humans from the drudgery of repetitive tasks, from the fear of insecurity around food and economics. And we could literally all have AIs that we are creating to do new amazing things in the world if we're able to get people to understand it. And I don't think it's that complex. People are like nervous about it when they hear AI, when
Um,
they hear machine
yes.
learning, they freak out. But it's actually, I sometimes I've taught people to build a dad joke chatbot in like 10 minutes. It's much easier to design AI in a no-code environment than it was to design a compiler in the 1970s.
Mhm. Very true. But then again, people are there are times when people aren't really interested in it. Like we have certain educational drives in India, and they go to far-fetched rural areas, and the children there, the even the adults there, they don't really bother about education. And I believe that it's not only India but many parts of the world that people don't really bother much about education. When they don't bother about education in itself, how can they even begin to comprehend something like artificial intelligence?
You got a lot of big questions. I think, look, I think there's a lot of reasons that people are uninterested in education, but at its core, they either they are either being taught to fear it, which what I've seen a lot in the United States is that, education has begun to take on this role as a liberal institution. And so in a lot of societies in the US where people see themselves as conservative, they have this fear that education is going to sort of disrupt their way of thinking, disrupt their children, and so they're actively campaigning against education. They see it as an existential threat. But I think the other thing is, like, it may be a bridge too far for them in their mind. We need to continue to try to figure out how we can sort of help them make that leap. For you and I, the understand how we get from AI is going to be good for us is simple. We can see that. But for someone that is in, dire economic circumstances, to them, you know, a better roof, a little bit of capital invested in their small business is what they see as the next step. You and I, we're still trying to get them up to the second floor of the building, and you and I are trying to talk to them about the 50th floor of the building. Maybe it's a little too fast.
Very true. So, how will the world of immigration actually be affected by the advent of artificial intelligence overall?
Well, it's on the negative side. It there's a lot of traditional lines of business in the U.S. and around the world that really has to do with filling out forms. And those things have traditionally been highly profitable for attorneys because we can assign paralegals and other staff to do them. That staff can become incredibly fast at doing them, and yet we can still charge high rates for them. And so that has traditionally been a profit center for us. We're seeing disruptors from inside the law and outside the law begin to offer those services at incredibly low prices. But consumers are going to begin to understand that they don't need to pay lawyers for those things, or at least they don't need to pay lawyers a large amount of money for those things. And you're going to see those traditional profit centers go away. On the other hand, there's a giant market in the United States. Over 80% of immigrants go unrepresented in their cases, both in court and in forms. And so we're going to have an opportunity to deliver services to that giant group of people, and that can be an incredible profit center for us. For the lawyers that refuse to understand artificial intelligence or more advanced litigation and complex cases, bye. But for the people that learn to use these tools or go into the higher level of things that machines are going to have a very hard time doing for a very long time, they're going to be fine.
Will prejudices regarding certain communities in reference to terrorism be subsided by the advent of artificial intelligence, or how far can terrorism be curbed with the aid of AI?
You know, Sometimes people think about the problem of encryption, and they talk about how in encryption, sort of defense is greatly stripping offense. And so, for instance, Bitcoin has never been hacked. But what we've seen in social networks and disinformation is that offense is going way faster than defense. False ideas and ideologies spread more quickly and are more attractive in the existing networks than their true counterparts. And they're harder to stamp out. They're like some sort of weed that is incredibly vigorous and has no predators. Those are the sources of racism and terrorism, these false ideologies, and they've existed far before technology, but technology has seen them be able to spread quickly. You see people feeling extreme isolation and sadness, and they turn to these ideologies to sort of hopefully as a balm for that. They end up finding community in these groups. And so far, what we've seen from AI is that it's made those things worse.
Lastly, how do you think the usage of chatbots, such as the one you are associated with your TangoBot, be useful to law firms, practitioners, and immigrants? And do you think that a certain amount of prejudice and spirit of non disclosure will be exhibited by clients when conversing with a chatbot?
I'll take the so clients have demonstrated a willingness to divulge far more information than I ask them for in my bots, far more rapidly than I ever expected. And so that's a surprise, right? That they're just like, okay, hey bot, what's up? Here's my life story. Let's yeah, another thing about them giving false information to a bot that I think is like sort of, maybe you're framing the question in a way that's not fair to them, is that, when someone sees an expert system, they see a game, they see a system, they naturally begin to play with it. Well, what if I'm married to a US citizen and I have a US citizen kid? What will that do? Well, what if I'm married to a US legal permanent resident? They're running scenarios through the system on the bot. And I love that. I mean, I love that in consults. I love clients that want to ask me all their different scenarios. So I think that if we frame the conversation within the expert system, within the chatbot, in the proper manner, it actually allows people to begin to interact with the law and play with it in a way that is good for them. It makes the law more accessible to them. And once they reach that moment that they're ready to talk to an attorney, the bot has already done an incredible amount of work in helping them understand who the attorney they need is and what that service they want is. And the way that we design our bots is that the most common source of legal information within our conversations is based on our own proprietary convolutional neural net that shows potential clients videos of the attorney whose bot. So let me back up, because we haven't actually talked. The way that your Tango bot works is that I provide a white label chatbot to law firms that they can customize and they can fill with their content. My bots work for law firms and they disappear into the law firm as an employee of the firm. My brand is not a part of the experience. It's all about amplifying that attorney's brand. And so when people come in on Facebook Messenger, when they come in on WhatsApp, when they come in on SMS and they chat with the bot that's based in that law firm, what the bot is trying to do is deliver them video and text answers from that law firm answering their question. And what that does is it creates a bond between the potential client and the law firm. They see that attorney and that legal staff in these videos in the chat answering their questions, being human beings, displaying emotional intelligence and legal intelligence. And then when they finally sit in front of you, when they finally decide to have your law firm, they've already got an incredible bond with you. They already trust you, and they've already determined that they're the right client for you, and vice versa. One of the things that in lawyers that really have a lot of volume in their firm is that they actually get a lot of cases they don't want, and that's a waste of their time. And so we're helping both make that connection more deep and rapid, but we're also disqualifying people that are not appropriate.
Well, I guess the legal profession is all about building rapports.
Precisely.
Uh,
Have you seen? I
and
have a couple questions for you, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, have you seen any legal chatbots in India or abroad that really captured your eye and your imagination?
Nothing, none as such, none.
And what do you think one would have to do that?
I think one would have to precisely catch my attention by doing exactly what your bot does, by letting me run my scenarios through it in order to further understand, further increase my understanding of the law, and as well as further make me believe in the bot. Like, it might as well be that might run a fake scenario through it, just in order to like, it might as well be that I know the law and I run something, and just in order to know that the bot is what the bot is doing is actually the right thing to do.
You're testing it.
Yeah, sure. I would,
Cool.
I would most certainly would.
Hmm.
If I'm to
I
be a
like that.
client, why wouldn't I?
Right. Totally. Totally. What no code expert system building platforms are proliferating that you see?
I'm not really informed about that.
Okay.
Not really informed.
Okay. Because we have some frameworks in the United States, but I'm not sure how international they are, and I also am very interested in seeing frameworks that are from outside the U.S. that help people build expert systems. Because, to my mind, at least, the expert system itself has nothing to do with the underlying legal framework.
Well, it's all about policies, and I suppose, and as far as the Indian government, not the Indian government, but but as far as the Indian technological infrastructure is concerned, I think we are lagging far behind, far behind. We
Hmm.
don't really have much of good policies that we can actually execute in order to make something good. We don't, and I believe that it will be a matter of time before we come up with it with something good, but it'll take some time. At least 2 to 3 years it will definitely take, just to come
Wow.
up with policies, and machines after that is, I don't know how much long it will take.
Perfect. Perfect.
Yeah, anyway, there's this last question that I came up with just now. uh how do you think, in terms of extradition, how do you think AI will actually help? Will AI be like this god's eye that can watch everyone all over the world and can say that this person has been granted asylum, or is hiding in this country, and that person can be extradited from there? Will that be the case? Is that possible?
Well, yeah, it's possible. Um, I think that in terms of how we, let AI surveil us, both internally and internationally, it needs to be something that human beings think about very deeply. I mean, there is, I think, tremendous potential for AI to reduce crime around the world. There is also tremendous potential for AI to be a tool in the hands of authoritarian governments that oppresses us. And so I think what we've seen around the world is that different countries and different cultures have very different ideas about the value of privacy, the value of individualism compared to speed of progress, collectivism, and those sorts of decisions. I think will have a lot to do with how how that affects asylum and extradition. Now, when you said that to me, my mind sort of went to the idea of you could either have this terrible criminal that's hiding in this country, getting away with all these bad things, or you could have a person who's fleeing from a oppressive regime that is a criminal only in that they spoke out against the crimes of that regime, and they're just trying to live their life in another country. And what who that person is based on your perspective. Not to say that human rights abuses aren't something that we can fairly easily agree on as human beings, but I think extradition and who's deserves asylum can also be very subjective things, and it would be. I mean, there's potential for risk on both sides. Now, from a real politic viewpoint, I don't see anything close to gaining spirit of cooperation on the global stage. I mean, country after country are electing these strongmen that seem to be pulling back from global agreements. So, I don't think that realistically we're going to see anything like that, at least for the next, decade.
All right. So this has been great. So here we are. Thus comes the end. This session has been awesome, insightful, and fun. Thank you, Mr. Jaskot, for your presence, and thank you, Abhivardhan sir, for letting me have this podcast. Stay safe, stay tuned. Godspeed.
Bye.
Yeah, Paul, can you hear me?
Yes,
हाँ जी, कैसा रहा बताइए?
we are live, sir.
Yes, we were live. Thank you.